Well, at least you know we can find our headshot.
Awesome.
Yeah. You can tell we're having a little too much fun getting ready for this panel. We are very excited I'm very excited to moderate this panel because I've got some amazing people here, some rock star panelists, and we're going to definitely dissect and discuss the future of surgery. First, we thought we'd go and everyone introduce themselves, tell them a little bit about their role. My name's Lisa Carmel. I lead strategic partnerships at Veranex. And in the event you are not familiar with Veranex, we're a full-service, medtech-only innovation solutions firm, purpose-built, PE-backed.
Thank you. So my name is Brian Miller, and I was an engineer by training, but I've been fortunate to be in the surgical robotics field for the past 24 years. Started at Computer Motion, for those of you that know the surgical robotics story. In 2003, Intuitive acquired us. So I've been fortunate to wear many hats over the last 24 years with early product development and research. So kind of, the 8 to 10 years looking out at the fun stuff, to advanced development, to kind of hardcore product development, getting things out to the market. I currently run all of our digital portfolio, and so that we'll talk a bit about that today. But we focus on improving outcomes beyond what the robotic system has done. You can think about the first 25 years was around providing additional dexterity for surgeons, 3D vision, scaling of motions. I think the next 25 will be that cognitive aspect that the data and AI type of technology will help. So looking forward to the panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janani Reisenauer. I'm a thoracic surgeon and interventional pulmonologist at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. My other hat that I wear is also overseeing innovation for the Department of Surgery at Mayo Clinic. As many in this room may or may not know, we were recently approved to build a new hospital called Bull Forward Unbound. And so this conversation fits perfectly in that landscape as we try to identify what are the key priorities that are going to go into our hospital of the future. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Rackliffe. I spent about 25, almost 30 years in healthcare and medtech, kind of an interesting career. Spent 20 at large companies, then spent the previous 6 years-ish raising capital, doing startups. Had a lot of fun being on the other side here at this conference, which is excellent. And the last 18 months went back to a large multinational. So I joined GE Healthcare. I lead up globally the image-guided therapies business. It includes kind of 3 verticals, a lot of fluoroscopy, both fixed and mobile, plus an electrophysiology, invasive cardiology business. Really excited to be here today. I think GE's on a very exciting track and where they think about going in the future. We just went as a standalone company about a year ago. And just in that 1 year, we've made somewhere north of 10 different equity investments, 2 full-scale purchase acquisitions, and have over 60 AI-approved FDA approvals at this point. So a lot of the discussion today is going to be around how do we enhance the surgical practice through AI and other means so that we can improve patient outcomes.
And I'm Denis McWilliams. I'm a partner at Santé Ventures. We're early-stage life science investors. We invest across healthcare. So we invest in what I call hardcore medical devices, biotech and therapeutics, and also have a pretty robust health tech, healthcare services practice. My personal story actually started as an entrepreneur. Most of my life has been working in small startups and ranging from biotech to the surgery space. So spent 25 years doing that, and then flipped over to, as we say, the dark side of venture capital. Even though I think Santé, we're not dark, we're early stage investors. I mean, we're probably crazy. But we've made several investments. We've had a long-standing thesis in Santé for over 4 years in investing in the digitization of the surgical OR. It's been a big focus for us. We've made 3 investments, actually one with Brian Seaman Intuitive, and it's been a great space, and we're super excited about it.
Great. Well, so future of surgery, digital surgery is a big one. So we thought we might, first we'll discuss and hone in on some of the issues, unmet needs, hurdles, and we're going to sort of focus in on data. And with that in mind, maybe Dr. Reisenauer, if you want to take charge here.
Yeah, that's a great and boundless topic, which could extend into Thursday if we let it. You know, we've been acquiring data for many, 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 many years. The challenge has always been, how do you interpret that and what do you do with that? And in the surgical practice, much of the intraoperative data is guided by preoperative data, which will then drive postoperative outcomes. So it really is not just fixed on that silo of the operating room. It really is from the second the patient hits the door to the patient goes home. And even in the modern era, beyond what happens when that patient goes home, as we start talking about home hospital and remote monitoring. So the obvious challenges are, what do you do with these terabytes and terabytes of data? How do you weed out the white noise? How do you identify a true unmet clinical need and use the data to solve an unmet need, as opposed to just throwing data at something and then trying to identify a clinical need? How do you identify the consumer? Is it the provider? Is it the hospital? Or is it the patient? Who owns it? Who should be allowed to make decisions based off of it? And who's ultimately medically liable for that data? And the way I envision it is it's a table with multiple seats around the table, and here are all the key stakeholders, and here are all the key players, and it's just figuring out how those pieces align and work together.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of came at this, our investment thesis kind of evolved out of the changes you talked about in the operating room. I mean, you know, we initially were like, okay, well, what's the future of surgery? It's you know, half of all healthcare spend. And, you know, obviously a huge theme is robotics. And so everybody's interested in robotics. Santé, we've just decided we're too small of a venture fund to effectively play and make investments in the space. And so we're like, well, what does that enable? And if you think about, you know, robotics and, you know, all the digital equipment in the operating room and what that's now providing from a data standpoint, we're like, wow, we're barely even scratching the surface on that. And so I think it's been a key enablement. There's been several years of trying to figure that out. And we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about value proposition and, you know, what really drives that. But it's an unprecedented time across all of healthcare. But I think in particular, the surgical operating room has just had a dramatic shift in the amount of data that's available from these procedures as we turn these surgical operating rooms, you know, to be more technically enabled.
Yeah, just adding from kind of a med device perspective, you know, Dr. Reisenauer talked about the amount of data and really trying to understand, you know, what is important and what's not. And so I think that is one of the huge aspects. It's about what is important in the data, but also, is the data correct? You know, when you start to look at technologies like machine learning, you know, if you train it with bad data, you're going to get a bad result. And so, but I think, you know, we'll get to, I think, opportunities in a moment. But if you look across, the ability to connect the data across the patient continuum, I think is powerful. And so when you're able to really understand every step of the way, I think robotics gives you a great sensor in the operating room. That's one of the benefits of it. And so I think there's huge opportunity, but I agree with Dr. Reisenauer. It also can be overwhelming on exactly what you're going to get from it.
I think from a GE perspective, you know, there's billions upon billions of amounts of data that we collect, whether that be kind of preoperative diagnosis with CT and MR. But what we're focused on now is really on the intraoperative data. There's so much that can be gleaned from a CBCT or a cone beam spin that can be used to help decrease procedure times, decrease fluoro, and improve outcomes just by harnessing that data and being able to identify exactly where that lesion is or what the margins are. There's so much more that we can do with the data that we have, and that's where we're really focused on. Our investments over the last 6 months have been squarely in that space, and a lot of our R&D product development moving forward is there, really intraoperative improvement of surgical procedures.
The one thing I'll layer on top of that is that data and AI are oftentimes thrown in together as a consolidative buzzword, but they really are two independent entities, because I think that AI does not drive change management, but data does. And I think that that's a really important, as we're talking about unmet needs and the landscape, I think that's a really important distinction to keep in mind.
Well, you know, we've talked about some of the issues that we're seeing, the hurdles. What about, do you want to move on into the opportunities and that you're seeing, some of the upside on all of this?
Well, we haven't had a return in the space yet, but yes, we think we've made some investments. I mean, back to, it's funny, Phil, your comment about your focus on intraoperative data, we kind of broke our thesis similarly down, to source of data. I think that's been important for us because certain data streams have different costs associated with them. Intraoperative data can be some of the most expensive data to collect, especially if you don't own the hardware. Trying to collect the, as you mentioned, typical 1 hour surgical procedure can produce 5 terabytes of data if you can include the video, the room sounds, the anesthesia equipment. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of data. We actually took our thesis from, well, there's actually really inexpensive data you can get perioperatively, so before the operating procedure, that can drive and improve surgical outcomes. That was Keela Health, which we did with Intuitive. And so really low-cost data to bring in, integrating some slightly more expensive data from the robot, and that's been a really interesting one to watch. I bracket that on the other side with a recent investment we made about 9 months ago called Surgical Safety Technologies with the OR Black Box, and they're the exact opposite. They're collecting all 5 terabytes of data, processing all of it real time, super expensive computationally to do. And so I think there are just opportunities that range all across that. I think really the question is, what's the value proposition a hospital's wanting to pay for? Because at the end of the day, who cares if it's a lot of data? Who cares if it's AI? To some extent, yes, you can improve patient outcomes, but the hospital's got to choose to adopt it and pay for it. And that's been a trick for a lot of these companies.
Well, Phil, do you want to talk about some of the upside on AI that you're investing
I
in?
think overall, like I said, we've made a huge push into the AI space really over the past 12 to 15 months since we've been a standalone company, and GE Healthcare now kind of runs at its own beat, which is super fun to kind of develop a culture around that. But we have hundreds of people now and a very focus on AI and software solutions, really on the whole scope of the patient journey. But in particular, when we talk about IGT, I think about a product we just launched called Embo Assist AI. And basically, it's a way with no click to segment all of your vasculature. Let's say you're going to do a prostate artery embolization, and be able to predict where to drop the embolic, thus to have the maximum impact on decreasing the prostate size in this example, and not having downstream implications of going into the wrong vessel. But in doing that, we're going to announce, sorry, not to plug, but at SIR next week, Society of Interventional Radiology, we're going to show incredible data with 50% less fluoro time, 30% less procedure time by using this AI software, which is something we harness and generate, and then be able to segment it to enable clinicians to make better outcomes in the future.
I think for Intuitive, we look at 2 primary benefits for data and then analyzing that with machine learning, but really as a means to get to what a recommendation is. So the first is you kind of look at surgeons like elite athletes, and they're wanting to continue to drive to the top of their performance. So the ability to go in and say, we can capture what happened during the procedure, so that you can go back, you can review, you can understand exactly what was done and potentially what you might do differently. We have several studies that demonstrate as you show somebody on their learning curve, so a new robotic surgeon, as they're coming up their learning curve, you can actually look at how they interact with the technology, and you can distinguish between whether they are novices or experts. Which is pretty powerful because not just because you can tell, but then you can go in and provide very focused recommendations. And so I think there's that aspect that we're already seeing an impact, an ability to really get towards this personalized and purposeful training. When you fast forward, now this will be a journey, but you start to say, okay, when you start to see millions and millions of procedures going by, you know exactly what technique a surgeon used, you know what technology was used during the procedure. You can then start to understand what the best approach would be for that next patient. And so when a patient presents themselves with a condition, you can go in and start to match it and say, this is probably the best pathway to generate the best results. And so that'll take time. That'll be a journey, but I do believe that there is an opportunity to provide that level of predictiveness that will really start to reduce the variability in outcomes.
Actually, I have a quick anecdote, if you don't mind. I mean, what you mentioned earlier about being able to identify good surgeons versus bad. So we were looking at a company, and that was one of their value propositions, that they could analyze and they could rate surgeon quality. And so we did it. We're doing our diligence, and we talked to a couple of very large healthcare systems. And I remember one call. We had the hospital CEO and the chief medical officer of the hospital system both on the call. And we're kind of asking these questions about, would this be important? And the CEO is like, yes, this would be super important to know. We would really love to know which surgeons need remedial training and those types of things. And then the CEO had to leave the call, and it was just me and the CMO left. And he's like, look, I don't want to contradict what my CEO said, but that's just not true. We do not necessarily want to know who our bad surgeons are and who our good ones are. And I was blown away by this. This is like, okay. He goes, yeah, no, I mean, because oftentimes our worst ones are our highest revenue generators, so we don't want to know this. And I'm like, it gets back into some of the challenges as you think about implementing this. And we're dealing this with SST with our black box. Like it's the idea of having all this data coming in is unsettling for surgeons at times and for nursing staffs. And so it's a double-edged sword that I think all of us are trying to sort through. I just thought that was just a great anecdote of the challenges here.
What'd you tell the startup?
We didn't give them that direct feedback. And I don't know, they may be here. I'm not going to say anything about them.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, because in the surgical community, there is a little bit of fear of what does AI mean for my job, and what does AI mean for my decision making, and what does AI mean for my judgment. And again, I categorize it as a virtual assistant. There's nobody that's going to take your hand and tell you what to do, unless we talk about automation, which is an entirely different topic. But what's interesting to me about AI is that healthcare has become so big, it's become so siloed, and it's become really compartmentalized. So right now, if I'm a lung surgeon and I'm seeing a patient with a pulmonary nodule, all I'm thinking about is the 5-year survival of that patient with that pulmonary nodule, and what's the efficacy and the outcomes of surgery versus SBRT versus ablation. What I'm not thinking about is that this person also has a family history of coronary artery disease, an elevated lipoprotein A level, and maybe their creatinine clearance is terrible. And maybe what's ultimately going to put this person in the hospital is sepsis from a kidney infection, and it has nothing to do with their lung nodule, and it's a completely irrelevant conversation. And those are those holistic 60,000-foot view interpretations of AI that I think are really important, that I think will transform the way that we treat patients moving forward.
Yeah, I just want to add to the concept of a virtual assistant, and I think the approach, at least now, and how we view it, is really that human in the loop. Same as we've done with Da Vinci, you're augmenting what the surgeon can do, and sometimes you're allowing them to do things that they have never been able to do. I think AI can help with that on the cognitive side, but having that human in the loop for many reasons is the way to go.
But the amount that humans involved is evolved. I mean, you look at some of the orthopedic robots, where I mean, literally the physician interaction is pushing the green button at the end so they can get reimbursed. So I agree. This is true.
Your back hurts a lot less. Okay?
I'm sorry, y'all didn't know this. This is why they have the button, because the surgeon can't collect the payment on it. But I agree. We're a long way from autonomous surgery and stuff. But I think we are going to see this data in AI is going to push the limits of things, of maybe some more mundane things that we can take out to reduce a lot of those errors, and that will be really interesting to see.
The only thing I'd add on virtual assistant or needing help or a physician in the room is the amount of companies now in the AR, VR space. We're aligned with a couple of them internally at GE Healthcare, but the ability to have a heads-up display and being able to phone a friend and be able to see all your where your monitors are at in front of you on an AR headset and be able to hit a button and say, call Dr. Reisenauer, I'm in a tough spot. You to port in and be able to see exactly what the doctor's seeing, to be able to say, nope, go left, go right, nope, use a different catheter. That's now, and that's really exciting. Now, wearing the headset is a whole different challenge to get through, and payment of that. But the core technology itself, there's some amazing things going on right now as far as driving more efficiency, being able to have a friend available or another physician to help you through a surgery, just boundless opportunities with that.
It's a delicate balance because, like, I will tell you the reason why I went into surgery is because the operating room is like the most calming, quiet, relaxing. Like, I'm the most relaxed when I'm in the operating room, which seems very paradoxical, but that's where I feel like I'm at my inner peace. And now all of a sudden you've got these headsets and blaring monitors and data and all this other stuff telling you what to do. How do you balance all of these streams of information that you're getting with just focusing on the task at hand, which is getting that patient through surgery? That will require some change management. That will require training our surgeons differently. And sometimes more information is not always better. Sometimes it's remarkably better, and sometimes it's not. And filtering through that is something that we're going to have to tackle as we move forward.
So you hear that? You need a Zen setting and a reimbursement button, right? Okay.
Everyone needs a green reimbursement
We've solved
button.
all the problems there. No, okay, but you were just saying on AR, VR, there literally is 20 plus, I don't know how many startups with goggles. Like, which ones are, what, weigh in here, Dennis?
Like, they could be sitting out here too. No. Look, I mean, it's one of the, I mean, Phil's right. I mean, that the technology to do a lot of these super cool things is here today, and it's not a technological hurdle on a lot of it. I think for a lot of those technologies, it is who's going to pay for it at the end of the day. Is the hospital going to come out of their global payment to cover the cost of this AR, VR stuff? Is the surgeon going to pay out of pocket for the training? If you're going to use a virtual trainer for it, is the company going to pay for it? These are all things that are having to get sorted out now, and I think it's problematic. But the data overload things is a huge problem. And I mean, it's interesting. I had a chance in a former life, we were doing some work with the military, and like the military has dealt with us over the past 20 years in terms of massive data that they started to collect from battlefield. Battlefield data management is a huge thing, and I think there are a lot of lessons we can learn from that. I'd be curious. I'm sure Intuitive and GE have studied some of this and figuring out. And I think that's kind of one of the nice things that AR, VR can be used for is a better presentation of complex data in a multidimensional way that it's just hard to do with traditional 2D screens.
Now, you referenced the the military and kind of aviation and whatnot, and that was a big parallel when you started to look at what the surgeon console was. I mean, the surgeon console for Da Vinci, for those of you who don't know, it is an XR device itself, right? You can see the real endoscopic view, but you have that digital link where you can start to superimpose things on top of it. But it is one of those where you go, okay, what information do they actually care to see? When do they need to see it? I actually think that's a lot harder of a task than figuring out, would this piece of information be useful? If you show it at the wrong time, it isn't going to be useful at all. So I think there is a huge aspect, but there are a lot of parallels for very complex, high risk, high pressure situations where it's well studied.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is the rate of change of AR, VR technology scares me because it takes so long for a company like GE Healthcare to have whatever it's a HL1, no, it's HL2, no, it's HL3, no, it's Magic Leap, no, it's Apple Vision Pro, no, it's. They're innovating at their clip. We can only catch up so fast. So by the time we have the product out, my worry is, there's something already better. Well, granted, there'll always be that, but that's tough. And so, we have a couple partnerships with one company that kind of oversees an OR and gives you library of cases, and they work very well. And then we have one, with MetaView that we talk about with Omnify XR. But I do worry about the rate of change of technology versus our ability to accept and incorporate the change.
We're sort of back talking about problems, but but there's an opportunity here on data interoperability.
There's an opportunity there.
I know. But so what is going to help solve some of the problems on data interoperability?
Yeah, I'll start there. And this has been a long-standing challenge, interoperability. So it's not new, but I do think now you get to a point of going, it's worth solving. Because if you can start to stitch things together, I talked about earlier the power of being able to understand what happens in the operating room, but it would be great if you could also understand what the anesthesia machine did. It'd be great if you could understand exactly what all of the individuals in the room are doing, because those have as big of an impact on the patient outcome as on what happens when the instruments are touching tissue. And so if you imagine, the biggest opportunity is you just know everything that occurred. You can understand preoperatively what the landscape and dynamics were, and then you understand what the outcomes. That's where you're going to get into this predictiveness. And so I think it's one of those where it's really hard to get interoperability, but I think it's critical now. And for me, it's worth solving because of the promise of what it can bring.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. To echo on top of that, I even take it back to, it doesn't even make sense to go to the OR, because now we've got so much information as to how this individual is going to behave from a healthcare standpoint that it not only helps you do the procedure safer, but should you even be doing the procedure in the first place because of this patient's comorbidities or their risk factors or whatever else might be part of that background picture that we don't see as well right now. Because just like our black box where you're getting multiple streams of data, it's the same in the preoperative chart. It's the same as you're predicting postoperative outcomes. There's multiple streams of data, and we still haven't figured out a great way to collate that and interpret it. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity there to reshape how we make decisions, not only in the operating room, but should we be going to the operating room? And that, I think, will drive aspects outside of data and AI as we talk about other med tech and other devices and alternative solutions and therapies.
Well, and it's one of the opportunities, I think, for the startups. I mean, is the fact that it's really hard if you're one of the large corporates to work on data stream using your competitors' products. I mean, let's face it, those collaborations don't work very well. And so we talk a lot about in our theses of this neutrality concept of, there are certain companies we invest in that we know the acquirer cannot be an Intuitive or a GE or a J&J or a Medtronic, because you instantly now make that company and their product unusable by all their competitors. And so there's a real role, and that's a big opportunity because there's a lot of the tech companies who look at healthcare, being a third of GDP and thinking like, wow, we really want to be in that vertical. And so I think there's a real opportunity for those companies to be those, continue that, let's just call it, net neutrality rule of surgical data that will allow this industry to really take off. Because if it continues to be proprietary platforms and you've got each one of the large corporates, has their own information system within the hospital, like that's like having 5 Epics in there, like that'll never work. And so these are some things we have to figure out, but it's also a massive opportunity for the startups.
Well, speaking of startups, we have a little bit of time here for each of you. I think there's startups here in the audience, and they might want to know what you're looking for.
No, start with that. I mean, I want to know what they're looking for.
Yeah. Well, Phil's looking for everything, clearly.
Yeah, maybe I'll just start from a GE. A lot of people are like, "Oh, do you invest out of GE Capital?" I mean, there's a lot of old thoughts of like how we used to invest. No, we're a separate company, publicly traded as of a year ago. We invest from our balance sheet. We are very active, so it's round agnostic. So we've done A through F, various check sizes from 2 to 30. I think we have more favorable, I'll say, terms than my friend, because what we're looking for, I'm not saying you have unfavorable terms, Denis. I'm sure your terms are very fair, but no, we are looking for less of a return. Actually, no return. I mean, we're a return, yes, but we're not in it to make money. We're in it to find synergistic assets that we can plug into our technology to enable long-term growth. That's it. So as I'm sitting here, I love IR, IO, cardio, pulmonary. I'll give my plugs right now. EP, all those are very interesting spaces for us, of which we're quite active across. There's a number of other divisions within GE that are active as well, but we've made a lot of investments, and we will continue to do that because we believe that the best way to grow is through working with startups, because that's where the engine is going, and bring those in.
Yeah, I would mention two areas for us. One, when you start to look at some of the clinical decision-making tools, the ability to get as much information from the operative field as possible so that it can be used along with, other pieces of information, but to help augment what a surgeon sees to make the decision. So there's a range of technologies in there, but that is of significant value because I think there are opportunities. We have some products now where surgeons are able to see things that are underneath the tissue. Couldn't see it in white light. So giving that information that does not exist is key. I think the other side, going back to data for a moment, there's a recognition that across the continuum, there are key data sources that not one company is going to own. And be able to drive. And so there is a need to create, it's kind of the interoperability, but there's also looking out for a vast range of partnerships to be able to really follow all the way from the patient first enters the door all the way till they're recovered. That includes at home where there's patient-reported outcomes, things that really matter as you start to understand what good surgery looks like. And so I think there's, as we talked about earlier, significant opportunity there for high quality, high availability, and then combined data sets to be able to really drive things.
I have a slightly different perspective given my background, but I'm very fortunate to go into work every day and be surrounded by some of the best and brightest minds in medicine. And Mayo Clinic is the #1 hospital in the world for healthcare for good reason because of its employees. And I think the message to the startups is that is a wealth of clinical subject matter expert data. There's a wealth of knowledge there. And our PIs, our investigators, our clinicians are willing to share that. They're willing to co-develop that because we want to be part of this healthcare revolution that reshapes how healthcare is defined. We don't want to just be the bystander that's once the product has 510K clearance and you're looking for somebody to purchase it so you can tell somebody else Mayo Clinic's using it. That's not what we really want to be. We want to be invested and feel like we helped shape the next generation of healthcare with you. So if you are a startup interested in a surgical intervention and you're seeking a clinical subject matter expert as a partner, we'd love to chat with you further.
But I think these guys need a quick start guide. Like, how do you really get, how do you start that conversation with the Mayo?
Yeah, that's hard because we're a big organization, just like the powerhouses that I'm sitting up next to on this stage. A great place to start is through our Mayo Clinic Ventures group. We have some members from our Ventures group here. And
Near Goldenberg is here,
Goldenberg
somewhere.
specifically is here. And he's a great resource to understand how Mayo Clinic invests in companies. And Near and I work very closely together. You can obviously reach out to me as well. And we have to start the conversation somewhere to understand what it is you're looking for in a partner, and does that align with our areas of strategic priority? And is there an opportunity there to potentially either co-develop or serve as an early adopter of that technology via first-in-human work and in a transformative way across surgery?
So Dennis,
I would just say that, deal flow of like potential companies to invest in is a lot, right? And especially it's week to week now. They're all flowing in. I look at Lulu, who helps me look through all these deals and tell us kind of what's good or not. To me, it is through kind of a connection is one way. Another thing is like someone showing me that they cared, saying something to the tune of, oh, listen, we know you're doing this type of AI procedure in this type of specialty. We have something. Like, do some homework before you just like, oh, I'm looking for $5 million. I'm a NAV company. I don't care about that. It needs to be some kind of a hook to make you want to think about actually reading the rest of it. And I think that's really important to just because there's a lot of potential investment opportunities right now, as we all know.
Well, after you just told them how soft your terms are, I expect your volume to go way higher.
I mean, I didn't say.
I don't know, Dennis. We want to hear about your terms.
Yeah. We've been active specifically in the space. I mean, obviously, we're looking for things that improve patient outcomes. We're looking for things that take costs out of the healthcare system, and we're looking to provide a return to our investors. So, all three of those things have to work for us for it to work for Santé, and then there are other ways that we make that equation all work. Our thesis within this specific space, though, we've broken it down into two broad categories. Specific, therapeutic technologies, decision support, a lot of things that we've talked up today. We've also been really interested in what I would call picks and shovels. I mean, the dollars invested in AI far surpasses by an order of magnitude the actual revenue generated by AI products in healthcare. And so that in itself is a market. So we've made some investments in technologies that we think are enabling for the category, whose customers oftentimes are the companies developing the algorithms and such. So we've done things on both sides of that. But probably the biggest challenge we've run into kind of in this space is from a startup company, really what is the long-term sustainable business model? Because we see a lot of things that are super interesting, and we see they're going to be the future of surgery. But at the end of the day, they're probably just a feature on one of their machines. And how much is that really gonna to get from an exit standpoint? Whereas if you can open up a new category, if you can move significant new revenue streams into their product lines, that's something that's going to be a lot more compelling. And so those are the things we're trying to look for. And it's hard. Those are hard to find because it's very hard. I mean, you've just heard how active two of the largest medtech companies in the world are in this space, and we have to pick our battles on the things that we think a startup can do effectively that they can't. And so it's a lot of work.
So you two co-invest. How does that work?
I don't know. We've been very happy with them. So yeah. No, I mean, look. I mean, as you know, Intuitive has a very good venture arm, and we were ironically both looking at a similar deal. We had our thesis on perioperative data. They had already started working with Intuitive. Intuitive had started a venture fund, and it was just a very natural thing for us to work on. And it's interesting because it wasn't Series A ready. It was something that we did a seed investment on, and it's been a lot of work together. And what's been great about working with Intuitive is, one, it's not just the money; it's really the partnership with Brian and the group, just in terms of what they can provide in terms of know-how and knowledge. That obviously helps the company relative to the things that they could do with Intuitive, but also is enabling for other partnerships and other things they can do with other medtech companies. And that's what's been great about that partnership. And it's been, I think, from both groups' perspective, a positive thing.
Yeah, I agree. And it gives us the opportunity to really look at things in early stages. So it's been great.
Not to put you on the spot, but you now have a newish $150 million fund. Is the investment thesis similar to the first one?
It is similar to the first one, yeah.
Do you want to?
Are your terms as good as his?
Listen, for the record, we're not just, yeah.
So I don't.
That's not
Yeah. Oh, well, let's see. So Muriel is actually speaking, Thenard McLean, who heads ventures at Intuitive, and she'll be speaking on another panel. She can
will give
answer
you all
those
the
questions.
details.
Yeah.
But I think all the all the corporate venture arms have been active in this space. I mean, every one of them has made both investments and acquisitions in the space. I mean, one of the largest acquisitions was Digital Surgery by Medtronic. I mean, to some extent, that drove a lot of the VC investment. When you see that level of commitment, we're like, wow, I mean, we really should pay attention. And that caught the attention of a lot of investors and entrepreneurs. So, I mean, every corporate's active in the space. And I think, they're at different levels in terms of how well strategically that's been set out within their organization on a business unit basis. I mean, you did two world-class examples here of that. I think other companies, their digital strategy relative to their core business is evolving, but they're all active.
I would just say the pedigree of and the history of the VC firm that is in one of your earlier rounds holds a lot of weight. And I sit at a different angle than what I was trying to raise money before. But if literally, and I'm trying to be nice to you, Denis. If Denis or Santé is in a round, I'm absolutely looking. If there's probably a list of like 20. And we're going to take a look, and because I can already tell by that, it's been pressure tested a lot of eyes, great diligence, very smart med tech people that have done very, very well. And so then so I would just, be careful about and be choosy and try to get the best you can. And we'll follow on. or lead, frankly. Now we do lead, and they're not that favorable terms. Let's just say they're reasonable,
send you a line.
reasonable terms.
Yeah, and rumor has it, honestly, that Denis is one of the nicest VCs out there.
Now you're really hurting my reputation as a venture.
And on that note, I think we're out of time. Yeah.